All right. Thanks, everybody, once again for joining us on another Skull Session Salute episode where we celebrate and pay tribute to the life of the late, great Bob Nalbandian, a wonderful soul who did so much for the world of metal. But as we've also been talking about on these episodes extensively, it wasn't just what he did for the music world, but also the person he was outside of that world. And joining me today to pay tribute and discuss more about the man we all love and miss. If you're in the LA area and you knew Bob, or if you've been a fan of his Skull Sessions podcast over the years, you most certainly know our guest today, Mr. Tobe Baad. He joins us. Tobe, thanks so much for coming on to talk about Bob. How you doing, bud?
I'm good, brother. Good to be here, man.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Before we get into talking about Bob real quick, I just want to give you kudos on putting together just a great celebration of life for Bob at the Bourbon Room in Hollywood just about a month ago. We just were talking about, I thought it was perfect, the way it was done, the way he would have wanted it to be. So just on behalf of everyone who attended, I just wanted to say thank you for doing such a great job on that, Tobe.
Oh, I'm just happy it turned out good, just the way he wanted it. And I think it's cool too, because it tied in with the fact that he had a couple of screenings there 10 years ago, maybe at the same venue. So it was kind of cool to come back to that also, because since we had memories from there.
Sure. Yeah. No doubt, man. It was great. Tobe, as I'm doing, in almost every episode that we've been doing about this, the first thing I'm asking everyone, and, the funny thing is a lot of people who've known Bob for decades don't actually really remember sometimes the first time they actually met him. So I'm going to ask you, when was the first time, if you can remember? I know you guys go back, decades. When was the first time you met Bob, and what was that first impression that you got of him when you guys?
Well, I remember it really well because I came here from Sweden on November 18th in 1992.
Okay.
I flew in, and I met him New Year's that year at a party that him and his roommates had thrown up at Mulholland Terrace, which is where he lived at the time. Okay. So that was my first exposure to him at his party. So and he was Bob, he was a fun dude. And then, obviously our friendship deepened over the next year or so, actually over the next 2 years. But that was my first exposure.
Okay.
And it was a great party, I tell you.
Sure. Anyone who knew Bob knew he was, we'll talk about that in a minute about him and partying, because he did know how to party, and he was definitely the life of a party too. He was one of the funnest guy to parties with. I will definitely say that. Well, speaking now of you moving from Sweden now to LA in the 90s, and not to, I'm going to try to do this, I guess, as respectful and non-judgmental as possible. But,
you don't have to be respectful. I'll roll with it.
No, I was going to say, like, even myself, moving, I grew up in New York, and moving from New York to Southern California, it's definitely a big change on a social, level. Obviously, great weather and everything. That's the easy part, moving out to California from wherever you're from. But, obviously Hollywood is, not really typically known as the most genuine of places in the world that way. So, as a guy who, like yourself, moving to LA from outside the country, I'm sure that was pretty challenging, and maybe at first meeting, people and being differently, but obviously meeting someone like Bob, and having just a kinship with him, like you did, a friendship with him early on when you first moved. How important was it to have a guy like that in your circle when you first moved to LA?
It was super important, because I was very Swedish when I first came here. First of all, my English wasn't all that good, but then I was kind of quiet, Generally, Swedes are quiet if they don't know people, and then they get super loud when they get drunk. But he was just so gregarious and outgoing, and I think a lot of that rubbed off on me. So I think to a certain degree, he's the guy that turned me into who I am today, in the sense that I say hi to everyone I meet, and I give everyone a chance, which he did. He didn't care if you were young or old, like whatever sex, whatever race, whatever. He was always open to give everyone a chance to come in and become part of the group. And that's what I try to pattern myself after.
Sure. Yeah. No, and he absolutely was. You hit that right on the head. He was, like you said, he's given people chances, or to be part of his world, or part of his projects. Even, I always said, even with myself doing Skull Sessions, I wasn't a guy that grew up in you know, I'm 47, so I'm about 10 years younger than Bob was, and I didn't grow up in those clubs. You tell, okay, yeah, and I didn't grow up in those clubs, and even though I know a lot of the bands, I didn't, you know, I didn't go to those early shows, but he would have me on Skull Sessions, and you know, I used to tell him all the time, Bob, maybe I should bow out of some of these episodes because I don't have a lot to contribute. But he was just that guy. He didn't care. He was just more like, I'd be part of it, you know, and that's just the kind of guy he was, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the whole idea with him is like, it wasn't so much about the subject. It was about shooting the shit about it. He just wanted to talk about it. And he was cool with an outside perspective too. But it really helped. We had almost identical taste in music. There were a few things we differed on, like I'm a huge Kiss fan, and he wasn't. And he liked Led Zeppelin a lot, and I'm not a huge Led Zeppelin fan. But other than that, we were very similar as far as our music goes. So we would always kind of, you know, go back and forth, testing each other. Yeah, he'd test my knowledge, and I'll test his. Which was fun.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, one of the things about Bob, you know, he would always tell me, you know, some old stories about his dalliances there in LA and Hollywood. And of course, a lot of these stories included yourself. And this is back in the 90s, obviously. And none of it stuck out to me more, I would say, than obviously, and I know at the Celebration of Life, John Bush talked about this briefly, but it was when the three of you started the Black Lodge club there in Hollywood. Obviously, you, John Bush, and Bob. Talk a little bit about that experience and how what made you guys decide to come together and put something like that together at that time?
Well, Bob is the one that pulled it together. So basically, it was his idea, and he was the one that made it happen. And of course, Bush knew a lot of people, and his name helped. And at the time, I managed a gym in Hollywood, on Hollywood Boulevard. So I knew a lot of people in town. I knew a lot of the, you know, bouncers and bartenders and everyone around town. So that helped out with the promotional aspect of it.
Okay.
So, yeah, his idea, we got together, the three of us at Bush's house, and came up with a name and put together a production company. And then he was just off to the races. And we had a lot of fun. We had tons of fun. We didn't really make a lot of money, but we always had drink tickets, and we always had fun. And we had some fun DJs. We had Bruce Dickinson DJ'd one time. Zach Wilde DJ'd.
Oh, wow.
I think Scott Ian did it too. And yeah, it was always fun stuff going on. And then in the beginning, it was meant to be more of a social club. But then after, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks, we realized that we needed to have bands playing too. So then we started booking bands. And we had some really good bands playing over the years. Yeah, tons, man.
Yeah, I know. He always talked about that time and what great, you know, times you guys all had, you know. And as I was, you know, mentioned before, Bob, of course, as we talked about, you know, he's well known for the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast that I know were on numerous times when he first started it back in the late 2000s. But yeah, but you know, you and Bob also did a little short podcast series. I remember, The Couch of Metal.
Yeah.
And which I mean, I thought that was when I first started this episodes, that was probably I guess it's got to be close to 10 years ago or so. But
it's more than that.
Is it more than that?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. But they were hilarious, and that was good because it gave, you know, a different. That was really, you know, I know Bob at that time, but it really showed a different, like, you know, for most people who know Bob and they've maybe worked with him maybe on a professional level, that was a more of into a personal fun level, I think, with Bob. I mean, you guys were just kind of shooting the shit about music, sitting around drinking. And I remember there was that one episode you guys did when you were talking about, I think it was Jethro Tull. They, you know, they put the first, you know, metal song together or something about that. Yeah. And I that was just such a great episode because you guys were just going, your back and forth with each other was just hilarious, especially with Bob. Like I said, you know, we were talking about earlier. He was a fun drunk Bob. He was hilarious. He was hilarious. Yeah. So talk about that little series that you guys did a little bit because I want to.
So that was basically a way of capturing what we did. That's what we did. I mean, we didn't record it, but that's what we did. We were sitting around listening to metal and just talking about it and arguing about you know, who made the first metal song, right? Who had the first metal riff. We would go back and forth about that because we had almost identical taste in music, but we did have a lot of overlap. Like I knew more about the 70s like glam scene since I'm a huge Sweet and Slade fan.
Okay.
He knew a lot more about the Bay Area thrash scene than I did. Mm-hmm. So we did have overlap. I learned a lot from him, and I like to think that he learned some from me too. So that was his idea. He was usually the driving factor with these things, because mm-hmm. I like my privacy. I don't like the spotlight. Mm-hmm. And Bob was just so outgoing, so he didn't mind it. Like mm-hmm. that was his thing. He just liked to talk and be out there. Well, mm-hmm. we had a good time doing those. So I mean, what led up to that one, I think, was the one of the Shockwaves podcast when we had the game show. Did you ever listen to it?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That because we were all sitting, a bunch of us were sitting on a couch in his apartment at the time and doing that game show.
Oh, okay.
Areas. And then after that, he said, maybe we should do one about the couch of metal. What a great name, right?
It is.
That's really comfortable too.
Yeah, no, that was such a fun series you guys did, and like you said, you did a bunch of those early Skull sessions, which were obviously, for back then, those podcasts. There wasn't really podcasts, many of them out there back then. It was maybe a couple.
I was the one that got him to start doing podcasting.
Oh, really? Okay.
Then this would be a perfect outlet for you. Mm-hmm. And then he started looking into it. But of course, I gave him the idea, but he took it and ran with it. Mm-hmm. He's the one that made it happen. Mm-hmm. But I did tell him that you should try podcasting. It's perfect for you. Mm-hmm. Especially since it was so hard to reach people with this magazine. Mm-hmm. This was much easier and, less costly, obviously.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And the good thing you just talked about too, Tobe, you mentioned that yourself, you're not one for, the spotlight or attention or stuff. But Bob, as outgoing as he was also sort of like that himself. I mean, he was a guy that obviously would rather give you the attention and see, sort of have you get the notoriety, not so much him. He never sought out any attention, any notoriety, any money. He just did things out of the love of not just the music, but also just having people communicate and come together. I've been saying on all these episodes I'm doing, I've never seen anybody who could connect people together the way I saw Bob do it, and a lot of it is because he wasn't connecting people together because he was trying to get something out of it. He really just genuinely wanted to see people. I mean, like, as you just mentioned before, he kind of rubbed off on you when you first moved from Sweden, saying hi to everybody, being nice the way he is. And that's exactly how I always feel. I feel like he's just such an inspirational person because you watch him, you see how he connects with people. And it's hard not to look at that and go like, yeah, why don't we all do that? Why aren't we all, being open and friendly like Bob? I mean, why do we all have these, a little insecurities, whoever it is? And he is such an inspirational guy in that way, where he showed me the same thing. I just saw how he was with people. And every time I meet people through Bob, I just think about Bob was, you knew the people that he was around in his circle were good people. You know what I mean? He wouldn't bring, assholes around in his crew. I mean, so every time I met people through him, I wound up becoming friends with them too. And that's something that he just loved to see. He wanted you to be friends with his friends and to create a circle.
Absolutely. That's what it was. He was like the spider in the web in the sense that he connected everyone, but then he also got connected to friends of his friends. Mm-hmm. So his web just got bigger and bigger. But I got to tell you another thing about him. I've never met anyone who's been so good at maintaining friendships. Oh, yeah. He would always, so we live in the South Bay of LA. Mm-hmm. He had a key to the house. Mm-hmm. So even if we were out of town and he was in town, he would always come and stay here. And he would always, every time he was here, he would make an effort to go out and meet, to see all his buddies in the area. Mm-hmm. And he didn't care how far he had to drive. He would go down to Lake Elsinore and all over the place just to see his buddies. But he really maintained friendships in a way I only wish I could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, the one thing, I talked to him for, weekly. Even when he moved, like you said, he would call all the time. He was the guy that kept in touch with everybody. Yeah. And not so much the other way around. And I think that's another unique thing. Like you said, it's true about Bob. Most people, right? They just have their circle, of close friends, and some of the other acquaintances. They, when you have family, and start a family and you kind of just grow up, you might not really be in touch with those people as much, but you're right. He was always keeping in touch with everybody, like you said, in keeping relationships together.
Yeah.
And that is definitely something that you're 100% right, that he did just as, better than anyone I've met too. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And also he never really judged anyone. And I know that's like the thing to say, like you shouldn't judge others, but it's very easy to judge people, right? You judge their actions or whatever. He never judged anyone. He was wide open to become friends with anyone. And I think that's who he really was.
Yeah.
And couldn't care less about money. He just needed enough money to get by, right? Put food on the table, gas money, and to pay the rent. And he never really cared for accolades. That's why it's kind of fun that at least, over the last 15 years, he started getting some real accolades outside the absolute center of the metal community when he started making the documentaries. He got more exposure, which he really deserved. But again, it was something that it's neither here nor there for him. He did what he did because he did it. He didn't have any other preconceived plans or anything.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, he never, even when he was getting accolades, it was almost like he didn't feel comfortable, getting it. He just was he'd rather, like I said, say something nice about someone else.
Oh yeah.
Or, he didn't sit there and gloat about it, or, and like you said, you're right. You put up a great point about him being not judgmental. The one thing I remember, when we would talk about somebody, and maybe it wasn't someone he was his favorite person, he might say something not great, but then he would follow it up with something positive.
Yes.
It's like he almost felt bad about saying something bad about someone and wanted to make sure, wait a second, but let me point out the good part about this person, and not just, and that was just something that was, like I always said this story when I first met him in LA. It was like, I always tell people when we first, I met him and had some drinks with him and stuff, he seemed like such a genuine guy. And I was just like, okay, what's the catch with this guy? You know what I mean? Like, there's no way there's something about him. What does he want? Like, I'm going to, figure it out later on. But after, like I said, knowing him, spending time with him was just like, no, this is just really who he was, and it was so rare.
That's all he wanted.
That's all he wanted. Yeah. Yeah.
It was just, gotta love that. Gotta appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I'm so happy that I had him in my life for so many years. The whole family, actually. The whole family, it's like, we still can't believe that he's not here anymore. But we're so happy we had him in our lives for so long.
Yeah. And obviously, like I said, he was, you were obviously one of his closest, you were sort of his right-hand man. I mean, you guys, I guess, went back for years. I mean, I guess what is it most that you're gonna, I guess, I mean, there's a lot of things we've been talking about here, but what is it really that you're gonna miss about Bob that, that he
well, the number one thing, I guess, is the fact that I can't call him because every time I come across something, some like cool fact about whatever, about Sabbath, about something that happened in the studio during the recording of Volume 4 or whatever, I go, whoa, and I call him, hey, dude, did you know this? So we would do that a lot. And now, like, I find something, because, I mean, metal is still my passion. So I read about it a lot. And every time I come up with a fact, I'm like, oh, yeah. And then reach for the phone, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I can't call him. Who should I call now? And the way he walks in when he came over, hey, Tobe, it's I don't know. It's his energy. I miss that a lot.
I know, man. No one had energy, like you said, like that. Just that positive, like I always said, when sometimes you get phone calls from people, you might look at your phone and be like, maybe not right now. I'll call this person back. With Bob, it was like every time you have phone ring, it was like, oh, hey, hold on, stop everything. I got to pick this up. He did
lift you up.
He did.
Yeah,
he did. Yeah. And like you said, it was always a positive. There was never any negative, moments. It was you just knew you could have a good time. It was going to be positive. And, he's just a one of a kind, unique guy. I mean, no one like Bob. I guess before we wrap it up, Toby, when it comes to, like I said, my main focus of doing a lot of this was, sure, we want to highlight a lot of what Bob did in the music world, but like I said, a lot of people who, don't necessarily know Bob outside of the music world, and what a great friend he was and what a great person he was. I mean, to you, it's like, I guess I don't know how to say this, but I mean, we just talked about obviously what you're going to miss about him most. But I would say, if you've got like any last, I'd say, words for Bob that you want to say, or I mean, what would you tell him? I guess if you had, maybe that last moment to talk to him, that's something we all wish we did have, obviously, and
You know what I would do? I would reinforce for him how many people he reached in his life, and how few people do that. There are very few people that reach as many people that he did. And the funny thing about him is that every friend he ever had always felt that he was his best buddy, right? Yep. Because he made everyone feel special. And I don't care about achievements so much, or money or status symbols. I really care about people that leave a lasting imprint by being who they are or who they were. And that's him. He left a lasting imprint by being the most genuine guy you could ever imagine. And on top of that, was being so much fun too. He wasn't just a somber dude that you sat down and talked to. He was a guy you can have fun with too. He was just an incredible person. And they don't make that many of those. So, he'll be forever missed.
Yeah. No, and you just, like you said, you just put up a good point. He definitely was somebody that, like you said, everybody felt like they were his best buddy. And, and I just feel so, and I'm sure, I guess we've been talking about, just so blessed that, and the thing is, how it is normally too, when you meet someone like that, genuine, and that you're friends with, you tend to want to like, oh, this is my bud, and you want to sort of, you want that person to be your best bud. But Bob was different because you just felt so special that you were in his world, that just to have a little piece of his life I felt blessed to be a part of it, because he knew so many people, and there were so many people that loved him. And so the fact that, just being my little part in his life, that I was involved with, and being, as close as I was to him, I just felt so honored and blessed. And, I just felt lucky. I think we all should feel that way. It just feels so lucky that we were able to meet and be friends with such a unique and genuine person that, like you said, we're probably not gonna, see the likes of maybe the rest of our lifetime. It's very, very rare, Yeah.
But on the other hand, it also feels a little bit like all these people that were part of this inner circle, which is kind of a big inner circle. It's a little bit of a family. I talked to a bunch of the other guys, and it's like, it's almost like we feel that all of us have been vetted, right, by him. We all know that we're all good people, we're okay people, so our friendships will continue. But he was definitely the hub right there. He was the one that brought everyone together.
Yep, absolutely. And like you said, at that celebration of life, I mean, you could feel that family vibe in there. Talking to people, and just, even when I'm doing these, these tributes to him, it's everyone's saying the same thing, and you could feel it's just like you said, he brought everyone together, and he's sort of like, okay, now you guys, I'm not here, but you guys take it from here. You guys continue to I mean, have, and like I said, and that LA scene, it is such a great familial vibe. I mean, with everybody, like I said, at that celebration of life, just talking to everyone, and everyone just, it's just a rare thing. You just don't see that even in circles and music. I've been to different cities, and had interactions with all these different sort of circles, but I've never really met and been a part of anything like I've seen with the LA family that Bob had there. And I think that was, at that celebration life really just showed, how that is. And, and once again, I want to thank you for, talking about him and putting together that event. And it was such a great time and such a great way to celebrate his life. And,
that was what he told me. That's what I need to do. He said, when I die, I want you to put together a party. And I always kept going, all right, I'm probably going to die before you, but all right. here I am. I'm very grateful. All of us are very grateful for the fact that you're doing this, because you're keeping his name alive too. And you're actually giving people a chance to share their emotions and their experiences with him. I'm really happy you're doing this. So I got to thank you for that.
Cool. It's my honor. And like I said, I feel blessed to do this. And like you said, we just have to keep his name and his legacy, keep going, and make sure no one forgets about him. And people who didn't know about him now know who he is, because like I said, he contributed so much. And a lot of people, that's the thing about Bob, he's done so much in the music world, that so many people. It's funny, you know. I mean, I've talked to people over the years, and I've told them, you know, who he was, and oh, I've never heard of that guy, and then now they see him in all these magazines, like you said, Decibel, and he's being featured everywhere, and they realize like, whoa, this guy, you know, did so much. And then the reason why, yeah, people didn't know, a lot of people didn't know about him is because, like we've been talking about, he didn't seek out that attention.
No.
You know, and you know, it's not, as we know, the music business is not one of those things where people are just going to give you attention if you don't seek it. So he just kind of went with the flow. But I'm so glad he's getting his attention now. And as you know him, you know, Bob's, you know, he probably hates that I'm doing all these interviews with people and we're gloating about him because, you know, he hated that. But I don't care, Bob. You deserved it, and we're going to do it anyway. You know, whether you like it or not. But yeah. So I mean, but it's yeah. But once again, hey, Toby, thanks again for coming on and talking about Bob.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, man.